Have you ever awakened in the morning with a hangover, but you didn't have any alcohol to drink the night before? So you're feeling nauseous, you've got a headache, you feel tired, you've got brain fog, you can't think straight, and maybe you're even pretty depressed. So you can rule out toxic foods that may be causing this, because you can get a hangover from foods as well, that you may be allergic or sensitive to, or food chemicals and other toxins. But in this video, I'm going to talk about your emotional life and emotional hangovers. I'm going to tell you 3 signs that you may have an emotional hangover, and the third one is really subtle, so stick around for that. I'm also going to tell you what an emotional hangover is and what you can do once you have one to help you resolve it more quickly. I'm Dr. Meg Haworth, and I'm a transpersonal psychologist and a holistic nutritional chef, and I offer holistic wellness for highly successful women abuse survivors and who had also difficult childhoods, and how that impacts the physical body, how that emotional experience impacts the physical body over time and can create chronic illness. I myself had over a dozen illnesses that I healed with food and the power of the mind and heart, and that's what I help people do today. And so let's get to this. Now, what is an emotional hangover? An emotional hangover really comes from when you've had a big expenditure of emotions. And sometimes it's not big, sometimes it's subtle and you're not even really noticing where it came from. And I'll get to that in just a few minutes. But there's other more obvious times that may be causing an emotional hangover. And you may not have ever put 2 and 2 together. And that's why you're feeling that hungover feeling and you didn't know. Now, one thing we do know scientifically is that when you register an emotion, every single cell of your body registers that emotion too. So if you're feeling a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, a lot of pain, a lot of anger, anguish, every single cell of your body is registering that. And so that can create this response where your whole body is inflamed. And then that can cause these other responses in your body, like the headache, like fatigue, like that feeling of just being emotionally overloaded. And you may have had that before. There's like emotional overload, there's mental overload, and you may know the difference in your life or you may not. So now I want to get to the 3 signs that you may have an emotional hangover. And the first one is that you had a good cry last night. Now this is one of the obvious things. Now, you might have watched a movie that just wrecked you and you just bawled, you know? You may wake up the next morning and you feel really off and you don't feel well and you may just not feel right in general. And so that might be part of what's happening. Or you just had a good cry over something. You just needed to let that steam off. And that's something that these emotions you just needed to release. But your body is just reflecting back to you the residual effects of that emotional release that you went through. So that's number 1. The second sign that you might have an emotional hangover is that you had an emotional upheaval in your life. So maybe somebody passed away that was close to you and you're just grieving and you're crying. And so you had this big emotional release. Maybe somebody betrayed you and you are like seeing them differently completely for the first time in your life. And you're having this big emotional release from that. It could have been you had a fight with your partner and you felt like there was no resolution for you. So those things are also, I think, fairly obvious as well, you know, where you might wake up with an emotional hangover and go, wait, I didn't have anything to drink last night. So now the third one, this is the one that's more subtle and the one that I think takes more time and more assistance to deal with. So maybe you're waking up with emotional hangovers relatively often and you didn't even put 2 and 2 together and you didn't realize that it was an emotional response to something that some kind of a trigger, something that triggered you into a past experience, into a past belief, into something that happened before. And I've worked a lot with women abuse survivors. I've worked with male abuse survivors as well, and then also in my own life. And I've seen things that will trigger people that seem mundane to the rest of the world. Like a pen, or a particular type of pen can trigger somebody. One woman I worked with, it was whenever she saw a toy fire engine, she'd get triggered. And so you may be seeing these things throughout the day that are triggering you. And it's because those objects were actually in the room while they were being abused. And so that there was a part of them that anchored that object as a trigger. So these things happen all the time. I read a story about a man who was triggered by the sound of the train tracks and the train signals. When the train signal would start, it just triggered him into a past experience. And it caused seizures. And when they were able to figure out those connections, they were able to help him resolve that. So this is something that I think most people don't even realize, that there are triggers in your experience. Somebody may have said something that really upset and angered you, but you were in a place where it was really inappropriate to just say something back, or maybe you were dealing with a narcissist and you can't say anything to them, because if you do, it escalates and they blow up and things get worse and worse and it gets harder and harder for you. So you may have to swallow a lot of stuff. And think about that. If you're swallowing your anger, you may be accustomed to that, but you can also unhinge this pattern. And so this brings me to, what do you do? So if you do wake up with an emotional hangover, there's some things that you can do. One, I always say drink plenty of water, like more than you usually would, to help you to release some of the emotional toxicity that's happening in your body. Another thing that I often will suggest clients do if they're feeling, if they've had a big emotional release in a session with me, for instance, I'll tell them to try activated charcoal that you can get. You can get it at Whole Foods, you can get it at any natural food store, and what that does basically is toxins bind to the charcoal and then they just get released from your body, and that includes emotional toxicity and the after effects of an emotional hangover, or a hangover from alcohol or from food as well. It helps to resolve it more quickly. So those are a couple of things that you can do. They're actually relatively easy. So if you just have activated charcoal on hand, which everyone should anyway, because if you got anything toxic, if your child swallowed anything toxic, you can give them some activated charcoal. But it's great for emotional hangover, or if you've had an emotional session with your therapist. It's another thing that can be really helpful to help you release those feelings. And there are things that you can do. One of the things that really helps too is to do things that bring you joy. So going outside, spending time in nature, feeling grateful for all of the abundance and the beauty. A tree that's outside your house, go hug a tree. I love hugging trees personally. Pay attention to the sound of the birds singing. Do some meditation. Things that can really calm your nervous system, can really help you with resolving an emotional hangover. So things like that are really super helpful. Other things that might be helpful, and I think probably the most helpful thing, is to really work with the long-standing emotional patterns you have, the emotions that are essentially lodged in the body, especially ones that you find yourself cycling through over and over again. If you find yourself being emotionally reactive much of the time for many things in your life, then I have a therapy for you that is profound. I mean, I got to tell you, I did 15 years of traditional psychotherapy before I found the therapies that I'm certified to help people do now. And I got more out of the first session I ever did than I did out of that 15 years of therapy. Therapy was needed. It was helpful. I think of the work that I do as a complementary, not an alternative. And it could be, and also I think of it as the next level of therapy, because it was the next level for me, and it made all the difference in the world. I went from being super anxious inside and having issues with jealousy and fear and anxiety. Oh my God, the anxiety, like I said, was really, really bad, to I have anxiety when it's appropriate now. I have fear when it's appropriate now. I don't react in the ways that I used to. Of course I react. I'm a human. We all react. We're all going to have anger and fear and sadness and guilt and shame. These are all good emotions. We all need to have these emotions as checkers that help us through our experience. But it's when these emotions become toxic to the body and you keep looping in this toxicity over and over and over again. This is when it becomes a problem. This is when it wears away at your physical body, and wears away through your mental, emotional, physical and energetic, your holistic system. And this is when you can get so drained that you're more susceptible to illness, you're more susceptible to viruses and bacterial infections and things that come through, because your emotional life is in upheaval. This can be changed, and this is what I help people do. So people will I'll do 3 to 6 months with a person. People ask me all the time, well, what do you do? What's your protocol? I meet you where you are and what's happening in your life now. And we don't sit there and hash out every single thing that's happened in your life. What we do is we work with what's going on in the body subconsciously. What's going on the subconscious level, the emotions that you're storing in your body and how that is affecting you, and also the subconscious beliefs that are running that emotional reactivity, that emotional reaction. And so what I find is that when people do my process, whole person integration technique with me, that they're able to release that emotional energy, release the belief, and then we replace that energy. And then that becomes the new normal. That becomes the new emotional reaction. And you are able to resolve those issues more quickly. So you can get whole person integration technique 2 ways. If you're a coach, a therapist, a healer, a conscious entrepreneur, a conscious health practitioner, and you want to add another modality to your practice, and you also want to sharpen your intuitive abilities, then you can work with me in my Evolving Intuition, Building Self-Trust for Life. And that's my online course and certification program. Or if you want to work with me directly one-on-one, book a free call with me. I do free consultations. And I would love to talk to you to see if any of this resonates with you. If you think this might be a good fit for you, then we can see if we're a good fit for each other. And if I feel like there's another therapy out there that might be more beneficial to you and where you are in your process, then I'll refer you out. I have a huge network of people. I just want you to get well, and I want you to feel better. And I want you to be able to stop your emotional hangovers, or help prevent them from happening, because you recognize them as they're happening, and you recognize your long-standing emotional patterns, and you're able to let them go and adopt new patterns, which is really kind of the cool and fun part of it, is like we get to adopt a new way of looking at things, a new perception. I often will say, all healing really is a shift in your perception. And when that shift occurs and you're able to see things from a different angle, and you're able to adopt that angle as the way that you look at things that have happened in your life, you are able to get well. It worked for me. It's worked for thousands of people that I have worked with over the years. Clients, people that followed me and been in my audiences, read my books. If you want to learn more about me, then it's in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone that you think might benefit. And again, book a free consultation with me. And I really hope that this information will help you get well now.